This is a CBS News special report. I'm Katie Couric. Good evening. It is my sad duty to tell you that our friend and colleague Walter Cronkite has died. He was 92 and passed away peacefully tonight here in New York. Walter became anchor here at CBS when television news was in its infancy and brought generations of Americans the most momentous events of the second half of the 20th century, from the assassination of a president to a man's landing on the moon.
And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it is.
That's the way it is.
For half a century, Walter Cronkite told it the way it was, delivering the news straight and unvarnished.
Evening, everyone. Here is the news.
Among the pioneers who built television news from the ground up, he forged a special bond with audiences. Trustworthy, plain-spoken, unflappable.
And you were there.
Walter was there. He had lived the history of the century and reported it. Born in 1916 in St. Joseph, Missouri. As a young man growing up in Houston and Kansas City, he saw firsthand the Dust Bowl of the 1930s and the Great Depression. As a young wire service reporter in World War II, he hit the ground with troops in North Africa and was the first to make it back with the story.
I'm just back from the biggest assignment that any American reporter could have so far in this war.
He was all of 26, a natural, before the camera and the microphone. He covered the Nuremberg war crime trials, sitting just a few feet from the Nazi architects of the Holocaust.
Some of them were sniveling. Gosh, you couldn't stand them. Stryker, Jew baiter, terrible man. He wanted to get up there and personally cut his throat. Hess was obviously mad as a hatter, absolutely insane.
In the early 1950s, television came calling. Walter anchored the news on CBS, first in Washington, then on the network from New York. As television began taking wing in the 1950s, so did Walter, covering the coronation of Queen Elizabeth.
She's to be crowned Britain's sixth reigning queen. An atomic device.
Atom bomb testing in Nevada, the birth of the American space program.
Fire at the apogee to raise the perigee.
Walter knew 12 American presidents.
I've met all of America's presidents since Herbert Hoover, and I've known some of them pretty well. Lyndon Johnson called the CBS Evening News while I was actually on the air and insisted that they put him through to me on the air. The secretary said, but he's on the air, Mr. President. I don't give a damn where he is. Put him on the phone.
He assumed the anchor chair of the evening news in 1962.
Good evening from the CBS News Control Center in New York. This is Walter Cronkite reporting.
Supreme Court today legalized abortion.
A flurry of activity at the Jack Ruby trial.
The risk of a meltdown at the 3 Mile Island atomic power plant.
And he was with us during America's darkest moments.
From Dallas, Texas, the flash, apparently official, President Kennedy died at 1 p.m. Central Standard Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, some 38 minutes ago.
And I almost lost it there.
There has been a display of naked violence in the streets of downtown Chicago. The witness to that Hilton violence.
Cronkite was a fixture at political conventions, including the Democrats' chaotic meeting in Chicago in 1968. A party in a country at war with itself over Vietnam. Walter's skepticism grew while reporting on the Vietnam War. He shared those feelings in a landmark broadcast in which he acknowledged he was stating his opinion that it was time for the nation to withdraw.
But it is increasingly clear to this reporter that the only rational way out then will be to negotiate, not as victors, but as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy and did the best they could.
After that report, I recall that LBJ said to many of us that if I've lost Walter Cronkite, I've lost the war.
Countdown is at 2 minutes.
But his personal passion was space.
I think that our conquest of space will probably be the most important story of the whole 20th century.
Looks like a good flight. Oh, go, baby.
In 1969, a waiting world held its breath as man first approached the surface of the moon.
The Eagle has landed. Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground.
Oh, boy. Boy.
Okay, we're going to be busy for a minute.
When that vehicle landed on the moon, I was speechless. I really couldn't say a thing.
It's a measure of the man that he preferred the triumphs of the space program to the despair in so much of the news.
I mean, at a time when there were a lot of other problems in this country and elsewhere, people were downcast. Everybody there was upcast. We were looking toward the stars, looking toward the moon. There was a spirit that was absolutely incomparable.
This is my last broadcast as the anchorman of the CBS Evening News. For me, it's a moment for which I long have planned, but which nevertheless comes with some sadness.
His own spirit was unconquerable. After leaving the evening news, he traveled well into his 80s, making documentaries and enjoying himself. In 1996, he told us how he felt about the amazing century he had witnessed.
If there's anything I've learned, it is that we Americans do have a way of rising to the challenges that confront us. Just when it seems we're most divided, we suddenly show our remarkable solidarity. The 20th century may be leaving us with a host of problems, but I've also noted that it does seem darkest before the dawn. There's reason to hope for the 21st century, and that's the way it will be.
So, to repeat, if you're just tuning in, longtime CBS News anchor and journalism giant Walter Cronkite has died at the age of 92. There will be much more about him on upcoming CBS News broadcasts and on a primetime CBS News special, That's the Way It Was, Remembering Walter Cronkite, Sunday evening at 7, 6 Central. I'm Katie Couric, CBS News, New York.